coach, I guess, was not able to make it, so he's gonna have to take over.
Okay.
So he wanted me to tell you that.
Good, how are you? I asked us to print out the agenda. I guess she didn't. Are you still open now for that?
Beth was done at 4. She might still be in there.
Okay, let me check.
I don't think this was.
I will be right back.
Okay, it's the minutes here.
What were you saying before?
It's not something that I think is intended to be a floor plan anyway, at all.
I know it's not intended that way, but I know it's not intended
Yeah, you
that
know,
way,
it's
but just
researching
one of those
online.
language things that,
And actually, these, what do they call them, surgical masks? They're actually one of the best for protecting you.
We wore these at work
Yeah, they're actually,
I don't
and a
know.
lot of other stuff.
I see what you're saying.
That's why I
I
have
see
no
that
issue.
it probably will not be enforced that in that manner.
you must have had to wear them all day, or you must have had to wear them quite often at work.
If it's not meant to.
See, we did that at work too, like a lot of the places we went, we had to gown up, we had to have a mask, yeah, so. I didn't have any problem spending all day with that, because you had to, yeah.
No, I mean, we got a little bit.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't always
This
comfortable.
will go a long way, but I think that's for sure.
For some.
The way it is currently.
But it's only going to apply to the current housing, so
Huh?
it's basically only going to apply to the ones that need the same inspections.
No, there's also single so
All the applies unrelated. Really only unrelated. Right now it doesn't stand it very much beyond what it does.
Okay, sure. I will, okay, thank you. Sorry. That's the, agenda for today. You want to stop one and pass it down? Thank you.
You already got one of these, baby.
Is that the agenda for today?
Yep.
Thank you.
Why don't you, I would have passed it around.
Here's
I didn't-
whatever. Here's
No, it was from last week, or?
Pardon me?
would you mind just turning over that name, please?
You never know who will show
Oh,
up.
sure. I'm gonna give you this,
Oh.
Jim.
I'm sure this isn't me.
Thank you. I think we are. Whenever you're ready to play. It has started, yes.
I know they said 100% chance of rain today, and the sun's out now. Go figure.
We need rain. Boy, is it.
We got some yesterday, but not a whole heck of a lot.
In the scheme of things, we need more.
So I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the Tenant Landlord Committee. This is the old one. The agenda didn't come out correctly, so disregard the agenda. We're supposed to do, it must have been my mistake when I sent it to her. We want to approve the minutes for last meeting, which would have been September 16th, 2020. I think that's correct, is it? Or September 14th? When was it? 16th? Okay. And did everybody get a chance to review the minutes of our last meeting? Yes, okay. So I'd like to make a motion to approve. Would somebody like to second?
A second.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody object? Abstain? Okay, motion carried. Let's see here. I had put on the old agenda that for the old business, which was continued group discussion. However, if it's okay with the panel, Mr. Barbell said he can only be here for a few minutes and would like to address the panel. I know that we're not doing public comment. I did not include that in the agenda that I had written this morning. However, are we okay to allow him to speak? Would that be all right? Okay.
Yeah, by all means.
Okay, Mr. Barbell?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a council meeting tomorrow night, and one of the items on that council meeting that I'm going to be bringing up, not for action, but to highlight to the community. And when this Landlord-Tenant Committee passed the local law, whatever it is, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned at that meeting that we're thinking about a new local law around false alarms in the city of Plattsburgh. And I was hoping that as this gets fleshed out a little bit more, and now I have a good draft of the false alarm local law that we're looking at putting in place in the city of Plattsburgh. And I wanted to get that to this committee in some way so that you would all have some time to look at that. We'll hopefully schedule in a few weeks from now a public comment period before the council meeting, but I would be more than willing, if anybody has any questions, you can email me, call me, whatever. I'd be glad to talk to you about what's on there. My hope is at the public comment section, we will have not just landlord tenant, but we will have the alarm companies, we will have individuals that have alarms, in both from burglar alarms to fire alarms, and encourage, and I'm going to reach out and encourage people to come read this and provide public comment and critique on it. It is a draft at this point, but tomorrow evening I'm going to raise this, and the reason why I'm raising it, I'll give you just a few, I'm not going to bore you with statistics, but in the police department alone in the city of Plattsburgh, they had 307 burglar alarm calls last year. 300 of those were false alarms. In the fire department had 297 false alarms that were triggering the fire truck coming to a residence. 2 of them were at Harborview, where I live, and the alarm system malfunctioned. But that's 297 alarms where you have a full crew and an engine, at least one engine and an ambulance many times, going to a house. And with the police department, for example, on Stafford Owens over here, which had one of the higher rates of burglar alarm, false alarms. I think they had 19 last year. You don't get one police car, you get multiple police cars that respond to a burglar alarm in that law office. And then are there until somebody comes and opens the office, unless they see somebody inside, and then they will go in, force their way in. But if they don't, they wait, and then they go through the whole building to make sure there is nobody there that triggered that alarm. So you're talking maybe 3 police officers tied up for 1 hour on one call. You're talking a minimum of 4 firefighters, probably closer to 6 on every false alarm with the fire department. This is a tremendous amount of staff time and hours for things that shouldn't be happening. We have the current code in the city does not address false alarms. My review of other cities around the country that have passed an ordinance similar to this is based on a national ordinance that was developed by police and fire chiefs and there's an association for alarm companies. They've all put together their ideas. We didn't take everything, but we put what we thought fit for Plattsburgh in here. It's our hope, based on the experience of other cities, we'll see approximately a 40% decline in false alarms in the first year after this ordinance is in place. So it's basically a public safety issue. If police officers and fire departments are out on a false alarm, they're not available when a real situation occurs. And so they're tied up. So that's what this is about. Hopefully you'll hear about it. I don't know if somebody will talk about it, but I definitely will make sure I get to you the email link, and after tomorrow it'll probably be on the city website, but I will say, quite frankly, the city website is not the easiest website to get stuff off from and navigate, but we'll make sure we get it to you. You can forward it to your members. And as I said, I would be available if you have questions in the interim. I just appreciate you giving me a little bit of time, because you're the first group that I've approached so far to let them know that we're going to have a conversation about this last night. It's not going to be moved for action to the council for a couple of weeks, and we'll solicit input. We'll have a public hearing, and then there will be some vote by the council on finalizing the language in this ordinance. I keep calling it an ordinance. Dean keeps telling me it's a local law, it's not an ordinance. So. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
I think it's only fair if we allow other people, if they'd like to make a comment at this time, and then we can move on. What do you think?
If you want to have a comment period, then I'm okay with it.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate. I would just say limit, set a time limit for comments.
I would say 2 minutes for the next, I guess, 5 minutes, if you'd like to come up and speak. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanne Brittner. I'm in Ward 1, Lakeview Towers. And I wish you had said how many trips there are to Lakeview Towers with the fire department. But the reason I'm here from the tenant perspective is because, I know housing got some money from the state during COVID. We don't know where that went. Maybe you all know, but we don't. So I'm looking at things now from the tenant, not necessarily landlord, because that's all under HUD. And so the more information I can get, I want to be able to get in somehow into their records and see what the heck's going on in there. Because I myself, I'm vocal and I can ask questions and get answers. But there are many people in there that can't. They're just old and elderly, and somehow they happen to tell me about them. So that's why I'm looking at it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to come up and speak? No? Okay. We'll move on. So we'll go to old business. There was a lot that we discussed at the last meeting. Was there anything you guys wanted to continue with that, or would you like to just move on?
Sure, I do want to follow up. I believe at the last meeting you had asked if I could reach out to legal aid
Yes.
to see if they had a representative who was able to attend these meetings, either as a witness for us to call upon or as a member to vocalize opinions, either way. And you were going to check with the mayor, I think, on adding a member or something. I did reach out to legal aid. They do have somebody who is able to come to these meetings. There are some restrictions in their ability to participate, and no way would it form a legal attorney-client relationship, but it wouldn't be at per se, but we could call on them as a witness for their expertise in the community, working with tenant law and tenant issues in the community, and how that relates to evictions and other tenant issues in the community.
Okay.
They're ready and willing to attend these meetings, and they'll sit in the audience and only speak when called upon.
Okay, that's good. I did speak to the mayor, and he would prefer that we use the council's attorney, just because that keeps it more condensed, and that we're not, asking for outside opinions that should be confined to the panel. Which I think is a good idea. So I guess when we get to that point, I think it'd be best to readdress it at that time, because we don't really know exactly what we're looking into at this moment. So I think projectively, we're not there yet. When we get there, I think we should bring this up again but I don't think that we're making any laws right now, we're not.
No.
Even close. Just so we know where we stand, I think we have a good idea about that, and what our options are when we get to that point. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Was there anything anybody else wanted?
I'd like to revisit item number 12,
Okay,
concern about overflowing garbage cans, bags of garbage and debris left next to the cans where the animals get into them.
mm-hmm.
How do you resolve that problem? How can we resolve that problem? There's a place over on Couch Street where the fella has 2 garbage cans, and yet each week on Monday morning, he has several bags right there between the sidewalk and the curb.
Mm-hmm.
And through the night, he puts them out Sunday night. His refuse must be picked up on Monday, but the animals get into the bags, and it's all over the place.
And there is a city code, right? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Moore.
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's clear on who is at fault and who gets, brought to being forced to do that. I mean, I got 3 complaints from a place on Protection Avenue. There's cardboard there, and 3 of the people that are from that area said they've been there for like 2 or 3 weeks. Well, okay, that's easy to identify, but then who do you go after? The tenants or the landlords? And I don't think we're real clear on that. Maybe you could help me out on that, but it's hazy territory.
So, the people that we deal with more commonly that are in single-family homes and apartments and things like that, we know who to get a hold of usually. If it's something that's a single-family home, it's easy to just put a notice on the door and it usually gets resolved pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
see, this is a business.
But something like Clinton Street, downtown, it's really difficult. I mean, it takes some time to track down the person responsible sometimes, because the garbage cans they're not labeled, they're not directly in front of the building that they belong to, and then no one wants to take claim to it. So a good example of that is the parking lot next to all of Ridley's. There's always something that comes up over there, and I send a notice to all the property owners, and
Yeah.
everyone just points the finger elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are we supposed to just pick it up, the city, and take the loss,
Well, I know, I guess what we have to figure out, is how to, I know that's one thing that was really important to me in the registry law, is now we got somebody to call.
Right.
But like, you're right, downtown, like, all 3 people said they knew whose stuff it was, a huge pile of cardboard, which is kind of a fire hazard, because we've had people, go by there and set couches and cars and everything else on fire there. So, but I'm not blaming anyone, because we don't have a good mechanism. We will have a person we can call, I think, for most cases. Because I know I was on Miller Street today, and it was really funny. There was garbage bags stacked up on one side, and there was a garbage can, and there was vines growing over it. So people just didn't open it up and put the stuff in there. They put it next to it. And I mean, that's probably a tenant thing, because there was a can right there, and you knew what hadn't been opened. But that was a big thing we wanted to address in the registry law, that we'd have somebody to call, because these guys can't be, chasing around for 4 or 5 hours or over a couple of days to find out one person or one violator. And I guess we will have the registry in place, so that'll help in most cases, I think, Art. That's a big step
It'd
towards
be a huge step.
identifying, because there's nothing worse than garbage, and I know that's over the few days that I've monitored that place on Protection Avenue. It's regular garbage, and all of a sudden now it's spreading all over the street because they get ripped open, people toss this stuff. And it really looks bad for our downtown, because we fixed that street up, it's nice, and it's one person. I know since we got everything straightened out there, it looks a lot better than it used to with the garbage cans all over and everything. It looks great. And then you got one person that's...
And still, if anybody throws a piece of furniture out there, there's no way of placing the blame anywhere. No one's gonna take responsibility for it, and none of the haulers are gonna take it. So it's...
we spend a lot of time for very little results.
Jim, I'm not 100% familiar with our process here at the city. I do know I had previously worked in the codes office at the town of Plattsburgh before transferring here, and one thing that I recall that they did for any exterior property issues, whether it be garbage or a couch, whatever it might be, they did send the order to remedies always to the property owner, and then they let the owner and the tenant figure it out between them. Those two individuals about who would be responsible for it, but all notices of orders to remedy went to property owners every time. There's not really a way from your perspective or the office's perspective to understand who the tenant at that location might be or issue it. Again, if it's a multi-family dwelling, you never know which tenant it's going to be, but ultimately the exterior of the property, if I'm not wrong, which I might be, in the property maintenance code, it's ultimately the responsibility of the owner to maintain the exterior of the property, correct?
Right, but the problem with sending an order of remedy is now you're taking 2 or 3 days for it to get there. Sometimes it's easier to just post a notice on the door and they act a little bit more.
I mean, you could put the notice on the door and send an order of remedy, right?
Right, but we don't want to wait for 3 days to have something resolved, ever.
Right.
So.
Between Marion Street and Oak Street, on Protection Avenue, it's perpendicular to those two streets.
Okay.
Basically on the corner of William, I don't know, I'm getting to William here, Marion and Protection Avenue.
Okay.
There's been a broken table out there, it's been there for at least 3 weeks.
Okay.
Even if you put, and I guess that would be the back of the property, in front of the property would be on Clinton Street. If you could put a note there, just, please remove this. There are a lot of other things there too. At one time, there were a couple of receptacles there. There was so much trash that you couldn't get to the receptacles. It's really a big pile.
I've had to deal with that spot a couple of times.
That would be great.
If you started an order to remedy process for when this does occur, do you think that would motivate the property owner to be more proactive in preventing it from reoccurring?
No, because they're not at their property every day.
But if it comes with fines that are assessed to the landlord.
But when they get fined that way, they just pass it on to the tenants.
Okay.
So.
Well, that might
But
make
then
an
that might
impression
make
on
the
the tenants
tenants
then.
not do it.
It does,
It
but
might be a little more
usually
careful.
if I just post it, well, I mean, it depends if it's a multifamily or not, but a lot of the times, issues like that are as a result of a bigger single-family home, so I'll post the notice and they usually take care of it right away. I mean, most do. And then there's certain property owners that we deal with, that have a lot more properties that we deal with more frequently. Sometimes it's easier to just contact them directly. So every issue is kind of different. But we try to make our rounds and make sure that we're not missing anything, but Monday's usually the worst day, because a lot can happen over the weekend. And usually garbage is picked up early in the week, but occasionally there'll be problems on a Thursday or a Friday because whatever happened during the week.
On a positive note, there is one landlord who drives around the van every morning during the week. I've seen him get out of the van and pick up empty bottles and cans and papers. This gentleman, I'm not going to mention his name, but he owns several properties in the center city, in my area, which would be Brinkerhoff, Couch, Court, Helen. He owns many, many properties where college students reside. He goes there every day and picks this stuff up. So that's a big plus.
There are a few. That
I don't know what he does behind the buildings, but he's there regularly.
There's a few that are pretty good. I might be able to count it on one hand, but
Something's better than none, right? So, I don't know, one of the concerns I have is that, I've noticed throughout my years of living here in the city of Plattsburgh that people do like midnight dumping. They go to somebody else's house because they don't wanna pay for trash and dump it in somebody else's, garbage, and then, expect them to, take it over. I've seen that, I've heard that, people told me that. So in those situations where they come through like creeps in the night, and then put their garbage, because they don't want to pay for garbage, into somebody else's garbage, and, the place might be, vacant or inhabitable or something like that, and it piles up, what do you do then, right? And there's nobody living there who's actually putting that trash out there. But you have people who put it there because they don't want to pay for garbage. So then how do you put the blame on somebody? And that happens. I'm not saying it happens often, but it happens. So, and that really creates a burden for the landlord and the tenant, and then finding out who did it, right? It's almost impossible to find that out. So kind of like a spin-off to things like that happening. Not that we have a lot of vacancies, and usually there's a lot of people around, but not so much at night. So, and I think that's when some of these things happen. Or, putting some type of stipulation in there that says that you have to mark, like the bins, like the Zorn cards or something, and the bins have to be marked with the apartment number and the address of the building, so you know where that's around, because then if it's visible, that helps you identify where that belongs to, for one. And then if we enhanced it by, I just lost my train of thought. I had another good idea, but I just forgot. But I guess that would help limit, at least you know who you're going to talk to about the situation. I would refrain from wanting to say that it's solely the landlord and tenant's responsibility, especially if somebody else is dumping it there. That's kind of not fair, right? And I don't think that we should eliminate the idea that that could be out there too. However, maybe make another stipulation that says you're required to have a garbage service pickup. So when making a lease with somebody or a landlord, that they're required to make a lease, so they can at least show that there is proper garbage pickup for the tenants or for their property. Which I think would be good, because that would guarantee that things would be picked up regularly. And I think that would help offset some of that. Just a couple ideas that came to my head, so that's what it is.
the property owner, I believe, is responsible for providing garbage cans to the tenants. I think that's already written into our current garbage law.
And does anybody
But
regulate that?
identified labels or identified cans would be something that would be incredibly useful downtown.
Yeah.
A lot of the garbage downtown is stored on city property, and there's so many issues that we've had with it, and it's on top of that, it's being stored on our property, and then we have to contend with it. It's
Well, at least the cans would be marked, so
yeah.
any, the garbage, if it's around that can, at least it gives you a starting point
Yeah.
to get that, because, because sometimes the stuff will stay there forever. I thought in New York state law that the landlord was responsible for getting garbage pickup, but I'm not positive on that.
I think it's not always required.
I'll have to revisit our local law.
Yeah,
I haven't looked at it.
I'm not sure on that one, so
Yeah, me neither.
I'm almost certain it's not required.
No?
I don't
Yeah.
believe it is. I know as a tenant, I've had to get my own garbage several times. And I feel like I'm fairly aware of tenant right laws.
Well, that's
Oh, you're
where,
talking about responsible for the service, the owner?
I
Is
think
that
that's
what
what,
you're talking about?
well, I wasn't sure. I mean, somebody had told me that once. I don't know if that's true or not.
I mean, I guess
I
it
didn't
depends
look
on
it
the
up.
lease agreement.
You mentioned reviewing our current local law. Could you do that, and report back to us at our next meeting,
Yeah,
what the local law says?
just as far as the things we've discussed as to what we can and can't do with it as it stands. Okay,
And
yeah.
and I think you mentioned that landlords are required to provide cans.
I believe off the top of my head that they're required to furnish an appropriate amount as well, not just, one can. I think they need to provide a sufficient amount of cans, so I'll double check that as well.
Yeah, 'cause that's a common problem, the overflowing garbage can, and that's where the animals get in and all that, so.
We do have a tremendous number of skunks in the area. I've taken pictures of many of them early in the morning.
Yeah, and goes back to some of the other things that we've discussed. Some of these units, they change year to year or semester to semester as it goes down through the middle block, and so sometimes you'll have a larger group that's creating a lot more garbage, and they'll have the appropriate amount of cans, and then you'll get a smaller group, and they don't want to pay for as many cans, so they'll have them removed, and then the group will get bigger again, and now they no longer have enough. So it's just always kind of changing down there.
Yeah, I like that idea of marking them though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do too.
that might solve a lot of problems.
Maybe that's something we as a group can work on going forward. A concrete step.
Wouldn't cost anybody very much money to get those stick-on numbers or letters.
You could even get a permanent marker, like a white.
Yeah, anything they would mark it, yeah. No one would have to go broke doing that, that's for sure.
Although sometimes things seem simple enough, but they're not. So, it's what it is, I guess.
Well, I think some garbage pickup people require that you mark the cans so that they know how, because they provide them, like, I think Casella does that. And they want they want to know that can is still there for that address, because they end up having to buy another container.
Or if they have to overcharge you or anything.
Right, so
What kind of information would be on these labels besides the address,
Address and apartment number or unit number.
person's name,
No, because that would be too identifying, and that violates their privacy.
yeah, and that
Just
changes.
the
Right?
address.
Right. So, yeah, just address and apartment number if applicable.
I want to look at item number 15.
Okay.
More frequent inspections are needed on problem properties. James Boss calls them nuisance properties. He's used that word with me several times. What's the rule on that? If property's in violation continually, can that be inspected more than once every 3 years?
Well, as it stands right now, New York State Building Code only requires that we inspect them once every 3 years. And now we have the rental registration, which I believe, I don't know if I haven't looked at it recently, is the wording exactly the same?
Well, it provides for if somebody makes a complaint, that
Right.
it can be followed up on. That would I would assume that would have to be a tenant complaining, because no one else sees the inside of the apartment.
Right, but I believe the rental registration does state the same, that it's once every 3 years. I know it doesn't state any more frequently than that. I just wasn't sure if it stated it at
No,
all.
it would only happen if somebody complained.
Yeah, in order to do those inspections more than once every 3 years, it would have to be a local law, and it would have to be approved by the state. And there's no way that you could just do selected properties, because there would be selective enforcement, so.
To touch
You
on.
wouldn't be able to do it all without a local law written and approved, and then you would have to do all the properties.
So
So
actually, that
Yeah,
I
it's
would
too much.
appreciate. I've been advocating since day one to expand the rental registry law to all rental properties. I actually did a bit of research. There's several rental registry, single-family dwelling rental registry laws that have been created by other municipalities. There's a few that were in New York State, town of Hempstead, New York, city of Middletown, New York, Islip, New York. These
Long
were,
Island.
yeah, these were a few that had one, and I think that it is important to expand it to all rental properties. I'm sorry, Jim, I know I'm putting more work on your office by suggesting that, but, you know, again, at the same time, it would obviously increase the revenue from the fees to hire more staff for your office to accomplish that as well.
Are you looking for input from me?
I see that you don't seem happy.
No, I mean, you're welcome.
What kind of laws do we have that pertain to the outward appearance of a property? In other words, if you have a lot of debris down your driveway, you know, broken furniture and things like that, is that acceptable as long as it's not in the front yard? I mean, you look down the driveway, some of these places, it's horrifying.
The state property maintenance code is, I wouldn't say it's the most restrictive code that we have. You know, I mean, you obviously can't have a dilapidated porch and we've worked pretty hard over the last couple of years on properties that are flaking and the paint is flaking and chipping, and we've got a lot of those that have been, and I don't know if Joe's ever showed you some of the properties that have already been improved over the last couple of years.
I've seen some have been improved, not,
There's still a good deal of people that we've been working with. They're used, you know, that's what I mean. My point is sort of that it doesn't always look like a lot of work has been done, but sometimes a lot of work has gone into it. I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to name specific properties here, but
Well, we don't have to, but I have seen, one thing that the building inspector's office tries to do is not single out one neighborhood, try to get all of fixing, and I've seen pictures of places that have been fixed. That's one of the bright spots that I've seen there, but they're scattered throughout the city.
Yeah.
So, you're right, to the casual observer, you wouldn't see all of the ones that have been done, but I've seen the list from Joe, and it's pretty extensive. I mean, you know, yeah, you'd like to do 50 properties a year, but in reality, we have made progress there. I'm very, very pleased with that. I wish that we could do more, but we're limited by, you know, the size of the office and how cooperative people are. You know, if somebody wants to fight you to the death on not fixing their place up, you can make them do that, but it isn't easy, and it isn't something you could get done in like, 6 months even. So they have made progress in that. I want to tell you that I'm impressed with things getting fixed up, but, you know, it's a big city, and no, you wouldn't notice it unless you had looked at the pictures, because they're, you know, throughout the city. They're not just in one area, but some
well, that's
headways.
good, that's good news.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I know, I wish there was some way we could show people that yes, we have made progress, but, you know, if you're looking for no more dilapidated, you know, properties, it will never be 100% or even 50%, because it's hard to do.
I guess what I was struggling to convey is that we can only do so much with the code the way that it is. You know, we can, if someone has a building that has flaking, chipping paint, we can tell them that they have to paint it, but that doesn't mean that they can't paint it purple or paint it the most god-awful color on the planet. You know, so sometimes sometimes we've had a lot accomplished and it doesn't look any better than it did originally, unfortunately.
You know, we had some pictures one time, before and after. Do you remember that,
Yes, and
Those were quite impressive. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep, we
It'd be
still-
nice if we could share those with the committee here at some point.
Okay,
Could you bring those in sometime? We take a look at them?
sure.
That'd be
Also,
great.
I'd like to say that I've noticed a huge improvement over the last 2 or 3 years on South Catherine Street between Broad and Battery Street. Where some pretty distressed properties are starting to look a little nicer.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was one of the more concentrated areas that we had, determined on the list that we had originally. There was a lot of buildings there that were pretty run down previously.
Well, I can tell you the people who live there are grateful for that.
That's good. Did you want to go back to what you were discussing?
I mean, I'd love to, but I don't know. I feel like I'm not getting much buy-in from the rest of the committee. Can I hear anybody's thoughts or, any feedback on the idea of proposing expanding our rental registry law or creating maybe a secondary one to apply to single-family dwellings and duplexes? I know you guys are focusing a lot lately, it seems, in discussion on the exterior of properties, but there's a lot of interior concerns that affect tenants. And that's what I'd like to see if we can also try to remedy.
well, that's a little bit difficult in that when somebody rents a property, it's theirs. For us to be able to go in there, that's not always that easy. If that person doesn't want you to go in there, and I'm not sure you can help me out on this, but we don't have the authority to just barge in to somebody's apartment and check it out. So that's why it's not done more frequently. And in a lot of cases, people don't want you to come in and look at their property, for whatever reason, don't want you to see the interior of their dwelling. And that's their right to do that. And I think that's probably why this law, or any law, would not do it much more frequently than that, because it's pretty cumbersome, and you would have a heck of a time. I would bet you 3/4 of the people, and I shouldn't say that, but would not want you to come in.
So without expanding, I'm not necessarily saying we need to do it on an annual basis at all.
Oh, okay.
But currently,
Sorry.
Jim, you guys do inspections of multifamily dwellings on a 3-year basis,
I think
right?
that if you're worried, for the reasons that I believe you're worried, I think that it would be better to find a way to encourage tenants to come forward with their issues without that fear of retribution that you've.
One of the things that prevents tenants from coming forward is that usually substandard housing or potentially overcrowded housing is generally cheaper and less expensive, and it's within their affordable range. So if they are the ones reporting, hey, there's an issue here, they are potentially putting themselves in a situation where they might become displaced from their unit and then forced into a very hostile housing market right now in our community. So there are definitely reasons why people fear complaining about their units. And I'm trying to advocate for a procedure in which we take that pressure off of them and say, you don't have to come to us every 3 years. We're going to come to you like we do for multifamily dwellings.
And I understand like Shalice's point on that, because I've been a community advocate and I've worked in people's homes, and I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Moore, I do, because there is privacy issue there, and especially when you're dealing with people who are been abused by a husband or throughout their lives, and they have this little space, and they want to be able to do whatever they want in this space, and right down to the point where they end up needing health care and don't want to get health care services to come in. As a result, that they may turn around and report it to like adult protective or even the health code inspector that things are falling apart within their apartment. So I see what you're saying, because those are the vulnerable population of people that could use that extra because they need it, not necessarily wanting it, but needing it for their own health and safety. And then sometimes they don't want to report it to their landlords or whatever, or even get the extra services because they know that the conditions of their home are sometimes deplorable. So out of fear that they may have to be displaced as a result of letting it get that far. There are people who are that way, and they do live in our community. And it really is a sticky and hard situation. And then gaining their trust enough to come into their home to say, listen, I'm here to help you. And I've worked with some people who are that way. I was fortunate that I was able to get their trust. However, you also can very easily lose their trust by trying to help them. So, you know, if you put a law in there that says we come in every so often because it's for your own health and safety, which is, you know, a big thing why we're here too, is to improve the quality of life. But when you're dealing with those people who are that vulnerable with that type of mental health state, it's very difficult to impose something like what you're suggesting. So I just kind of devil's advocate here. There's the flip side to people who want to be independent, who exercise their independence and their privacy to the fullest extent of the law, and know what they're doing, but then don't. And I just want, you know, as we're moving forward, to be mindful of that vulnerable population and what that could mean for them. It would be best if it was anonymous, only if there was a way to do it anonymously, because there are other people who could come into the home, like HCR, healthcare, you know, the healthcare services, a FedEx guy, UPS guy, you know, any number of people who have access to that apartment that could submit something anonymously, and that's another thing. That kind of takes the pressure off of them that they went and made a report, if it can be anonymous. But I don't know that I agree with saying mandatory every 3 years or within 3 years, just because we don't want to hurt those people either. We want them to know that we're trying to help them too, but that to them it's a violation regardless.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Emily. The 3-year recommendation was based off of its comparability to current statutory law about 3 years of mandatory inspections for multifamily dwellings.
Okay.
And I feel like single-family dwellings or duplexes should probably follow the same standard as set forth in current statutory laws regarding that. Councilor Kelly, I believe you mentioned to me maybe a week or so ago that you had met with some constituents in your ward and they had shared some of their experiences.
Emily's comment reminded me of that, and I'm glad you asked. I have talked with half a dozen people in my ward who say that housing for people with mental challenges and also substance abuse histories, it's very, very hard for them to find housing. And we're not even talking about decent housing here. We're talking about housing, period, just a roof over their heads. Apparently, I don't know how they get into the system and get identified, but once they are, then the landlords are really reluctant to rent to them. And the people who work in mental health agencies report that these folks really are having a tough time finding a place to live. I think our vacancy rate is maybe 2 to 3%, which basically means we have no vacancies in apartments or other types of rentals. So these people, unfortunately, are at the back of the line when it comes to rental properties. Now, I have heard that Plattsburgh Housing Authority is opening a 4-unit building on Bailey Avenue. And it is designed for people with mental disabilities or physical disabilities. And that would take some of the pressure off. They are also building a new project on Sharon Avenue, I think it is, on the new air base, that may house up to 5 families. I think that's right. But these are all things that help, but I wasn't aware that, people in this category of mental disability and also substance abuse were so ostracized, but they are. But I guess if you think about it, it stands to reason that it would be, but they shouldn't be. They should have many opportunities for housing as anyone else. So maybe that's something we as a group can look at going forward.
Thank you, Councilor Kelly. Just piggybacking on that for a moment, mental health is an issue in our community, in every community, and there are certain individuals who will not be able to advocate for themselves and file complaints with the building inspector's office, whether it be a product of depression, anxiety, or some other mental health condition that is preventing them from being able to advocate for themselves as somebody else without those conditions would be able to do. And that's where I feel like, as Emily said, we just need to help the vulnerable in our community who are not able to do that for themselves. Sorry, I'm clearly passionate about this. It's just, I feel like this is something our community really needs, and I don't see, other than potential staffing issues, any reason why we should not explore this. I know that staffing is an issue, and I hope that we can find a way to, alleviate that issue, and potentially expanding the rental permit registry to single-family housing and duplexes will generate enough revenue to offset the cost of hiring additional staff. And again, I'm not advocating for yearly inspections here, but just something, even if it's 5-year cycle. I know that's slightly outside of what the state does for multifamily dwelling, but and it's also a safety, a community concern. If a property is being allowed to become deteriorated, and I think I saw something that popped up on social media recently about some houses in the area that had a hoarding issue, and they ended up having to remove a bunch of animals from these houses. That becomes a community issue, a safety and a health hazard. At some point, not maintaining property, the interior of property will extend to the exterior of the property. It will extend into the neighboring properties, and it will hurt property values. It is a community concern as well as an individual tenant concern.
Well, thanks. I didn't know all that. I do know, though, from where I live, that they do come around and inspect these places. People come around with clipboards. I'm assuming they're following up on people in their housing.
Which places?
I would guess it's social services people, because I know I've seen them make people move out if there was too many people in an apartment, or in one case, the apartment was too run down, like you're saying, and I'm not saying everybody that happens with them, but they do come around and inspect places that they subsidize. Okay, that's just one case.
HUD does that. Plattsburgh Housing Authority, they have yearly inspections for their tenants. And occasionally HUD will come around and do that. And if they are of, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Section 8 is just like, for example, Plattsburgh Housing Authority's tenants. HUD is the payment of which they could pay a private landlord for that family to live there as long as they qualify based on their income. So they could live in that apartment building across the street, on Court Street, and housing will pay that, and then the tenant pays whatever their 30% that they're required to pay. So it could be any number of those people that come there. It could be one of the parties that inspect for the annual inspection for HUD. I know there is a person who does that for HUD, and then there are people who do that for the Section 8 part of that. But it could also be adult protective services. It could be child protective services if they have children. It could be any number of people that would come in and inspect. Usually adult protective services and child protective services only come in if a complaint is made to the subject. So sometimes Plattsburgh Housing Authority does do what they call special inspections, and that is based on a report that somebody did. Like if they live out of Plattsburgh Housing Authority, that could come from any number of people. That could come from a plumber that they had come in. That could come from the actual tenant themselves making a complaint against the landlord. I don't know if you guys know all of this stuff. I don't have to like tell you if you know already.
No, this is interesting, because I don't know who these people are, but, you know, they have a clipboard and they're dressed like they're doing something official.
And that could be, and like I said, that could be any number of people. That could be the staff from Plattsburgh Housing Authority. That could be adult protective services if the person is of a certain age, lives by themselves, or is in the classification of the American Disabilities Act, you know, saying that they have some type of disability. That could be child protective if they're a regular family who have children. There's any number of reporters. I mean, teachers are reporters, counselors, pediatricians. I'm a mandated reporter, believe it or not, but I don't exercise that. Anyway, not the point. So any number of people could be in that. A police officer can come into the home. There could have been a complaint made. He smells an odor. He calls CPS. They're investigating. And then they do have preventive services, which is like a follow-up. They can come in and inspect the premises as well. I mean, so any number of people could have a clipboard. That's all I'm saying. So, you know.
Don't forget the fraud investigator.
Oh, fraud investigator. Yeah. So there could be a number of people that would come to the home. So I guess it's kind of a good thing, right? That there's other things out there that could require other people to come to the homes to do inspections. They could come there to even do an assessment. I carry clipboard too, actually, for my job. So it could have been me. No. But there's a lot of reasons why someone could come into their home. There's a lot of reasons that they're legitimately there too. Like I mentioned before, healthcare services. They just had surgery or they have an infection. A healthcare worker could come in, you know, and do IVs for them, but they could be mandated reporters as well. So I guess that kind of makes things better, right? But when you have people who don't want services, like the one particular lady that I was helping, her condition was so bad that I had to reach out for resources myself because I did not know what else to do. And I had come in to clean her home so that she could pass inspection. And then, so I had reached out to another resource advocate, and she was able to get her further services, like being able to take a bath, you know, getting some regular help. And that's something that's unfortunate too, when you have tenants who want to exercise their right to privacy. You also start to dig into other areas of their life that are concerns too when you are trying to increase the quality of the life and preserve the property, right? So, and this particular lady, and she ended up losing one of her toes. She's not even a diabetic. And it was just, she does have neuropathy, so she didn't feel the cut or anything, but it just, very sweet lady, very nice lady, just troubled. But by years and years of abuse of two husbands, so, but just a great lady. You know, and it's just, it's a terrible, terrible thing. And she was afraid to reach out for services and help, and that's something else that I wish that people who are economically depressed had too, is insurance paying for someone to come and help them clean up their homes if they're not able to do it themselves, and still being able to live independently. That's not something that we even have in this area. I don't even think that Medicaid or Medicare or any of the government issued insurances pay for anything like that, which, you know, would be important, because that would help preserve the fact that they can still stay there and still live in a clean environment, and ultimately that, if you want to get into a cost thing, ultimately that preserves the amount of damage that can be done to an apartment, having the tenant to pay later or not being able to pay for it, and the landlord having to take that, or the person not spreading infection. I know that's kind of a little off from the tenant landlord, but when you're looking at the whole scope of things and how things work, yeah, so I kind of went off a little bit, but yeah, so that, you know, it's just a couple of things I wanted to throw out there. So if you have any other concerns about, I guess PHA, I can help you.
I know in serious, you know, cases of mental health issues, there might be somebody that would come on site, and especially if it's a sponsored housing program. But there are people with mild to moderate mental health issues that don't have any type of services that will come and inspect their properties for them. Which is why I think that as another reason for proposing expanding the rental registry to single family homes. I don't know, I feel very strongly about this. I really feel that our community needs it, and I'm not seeing, other than staffing, a sensible reason why we should not do it.
I received a call today from a friend who relayed to me a story about someone who lives in the Plattsburgh Housing Authority building on Flint Avenue, that this person wants to move from one apartment to another, but she was told she can't do that because her home is too cluttered and the PHA won't move her. So I didn't really put two and two together when I heard this story, but hearing more talk about it today makes me wonder if that's not a person who needs some kind of assistance to improve her life. And you know, if Plattsburgh Housing Authority doesn't provide that assistance, then who does? Who would help that person remove all the clutter from her home so that she can move into another home? You know, I feel for that person.
I can address that one, and it's the worst thing I've seen done over there. She was going to go to legal services, and they said, okay, you want to go to legal services, we'll get you someone to come talk to you. Well, the person they got to come talk to her was not from legal services, it's from the state. When the state has issues in different departments with things, they bring in individuals. And this woman, and I have her name and everything at home, she just repeats what housing says. So the woman goes back to her tiny little apartment, and the only way they'll move you is if your medical equipment is so great, you can't move around. That particular woman's now on oxygen. She's been begging. Her doctors have sent all sorts of letters. There's so many issues over there, but that is the worst.
Thank you. I know that Plattsburgh Housing Authority frowns on transfers unless there is a great need for it. Usually that's because of family composition, having a baby and you're in a 2-bedroom and it's, say you need children. you need more rooms for your children, right? So your family composition has changed, so you need the extra bedroom. Transferring is not something that they normally do, and that is outside of the COVID-19, has nothing to do with the COVID-19. However, I think that people in general right now, because of the virus, really do not want to I think that they really don't want to move. I don't think a lot of people want to move right now just because, you know,
May
they're
I
afraid.
just add one more? Because it's my daughter over on Magali. She moved in there many years ago with 2 kids.
Okay.
She's now still sitting in a 3-bedroom. The kids have been moved out a couple years, and she's asked for a smaller unit. Nope, she can't move. So how many other units may be in there? I know there's 2 other in her U that they're elderly people now, and their kids are gone. They just don't move it.
I would definitely agree that that's a concern, right? Because when you have people who are in need of a place to stay, and especially if you're economically depressed, and you reach out to a housing agency like Plattsburgh Housing Authority who says, we don't have any rooms available right now, or apartments available that fits your family's needs. But then you have people like your daughter who are in a situation where there's too much space, right? And that they could move them out to a smaller apartment, and that someone who fits that composition can be moved in. And I think that's an issue too, is, you know, staying on top of that ratio of, you know, people not being in a place where it doesn't fit their or their family's needs, especially in these times where, you know, a lot of people don't have a lot of money. So I think that's important too, but I'm not really sure how that would work with Plattsburgh Housing Authority. I think that they're supposed to do that according to HUD guidelines, but I'm not 100%. I don't know too much about the HUD guidelines, so.
Emily, what do you say we take this up at our next meeting?
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. Are we, I think we're over, right? Yes, we are. Okay.
We've been having such a good time, it's hard to stop.
It's Wednesday, there's no other meeting to
Oh,
run
okay.
into.
Well, I didn't want to take up anybody's time because I'm talking more
Very
than I usually do. Huh?
I learned a lot.
Yeah, well,
There
sometimes I have good ideas.
there were 2 other recommendations, and I can save them for next time, because I know we all want to get out of here.
Okay,
But one of them that, I don't know if we can add it to the agenda for next time.
okay.
I briefly mentioned it last time, was the escrow account idea. So when a landlord has an issue at a property, but it's not egregious enough to say it's uninhabitable, but it's something that does need repair, in that period, then the tenant pays into an escrow account at the city, pays their rent to the city, which is held in an escrow account until the landlord makes repairs. Or if the landlord needs that money to make the repairs, then it's a way for the city to verify that those monies are going towards repairs. And it's a way to, again, motivate the landlord to make the repairs so that, you know, they're not receiving income until those repairs are made. That was one, and then the other one was, as part of the rental registry law, before I learned it passed, I think that a condition of that landlord registry law should be that they are required to complete an online landlord course every 3 to 5 years, and certify that they've done so that they understand what their rights, what their responsibilities as a landlord are.
Okay.
And we can discuss it in more detail next time.
So I'll put that under old business and then continue discussion. Okay. Did anybody have anything else that they wanted for continued discussion for next week? So when I write up the agenda. Okay. I did put on the agenda that I had previously written, that I wanted to talk about how often we should meet. I was thinking every 2 weeks, I think is okay. And I wanted to propose at our next meeting that we have public comment. So, just so people can, you know, kind of give us their ideas about what they feel is going on with them, especially with the winter months coming, and, you know, they may have some concerns. I know that there is a Facebook platform of tenants who are highly upset about things that are going on, and violations to their privacy, front doors being taken down because they're not paying the rent, certain things like that. And they didn't pay the rent because they have a huge flooding in their bathroom. So, and they, you know, reached out, whatever. So I don't know if those people will come here, but I think that's something that we should really discuss and see if we could possibly help them, because with the winter months coming, freezing pipes is a huge disaster. That's an issue. Things can be absolutely destroyed. I don't have to tell you that. You guys are landlords. But how do you feel about that? Is 2 weeks good?
Sure.
Okay.
What date does that put us at? I'm sorry.
14th.
Thank you.
What is it?
The 14th.
14th, okay. 2020, okay, so, I'm gonna motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, second, am I supposed to do the roll call?
For adjournment, we probably should.
Okay, so Emily, me, yes, Shalice,
Yes.
Art,
Say it again?
Roll call.
roll call
Oh,
for meeting 2.
yes.
Okay, I left, Jeff,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
okay, we're all set, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Oh, thank
Sorry.
you.
You don't have to apologize.
Let me stop screening.